What's up guys, welcome back to DIY Dudes. In this video, I'm going to show you how you can build custom furniture with basic tools and without a massive wood shop. I did this using pretty much scrap materials and supplies I had laying around my garage. Nothing fancy in the way of tools, and in fact, this piece of wood was in my house when I moved in, and I've held on to it for like 8 years, and it's finally met its destiny by becoming this beautiful bench you see before you here today. Let's do this. So for my bench, I'm using this 8-foot piece of lumber that I've had kicking around my house for a couple years. I'm actually I want the bench to be 6 feet in length. So I'm gonna cut two 1-foot sections off of each end, and I'm gonna use those as the legs for the bench. So now that I've got these ends cut off, I want to make sure they're perfectly smooth. So I'm going to use some wood clamps, clamp them both together with one end flush, and then run the belt sander over it to perfectly smooth it out. So this board's got a pretty sharp edge on it. So before I lift it off the table, I'm going to take my little palm router. It's got a half-inch roundover bit just to take that sharp edge off. In order to make the base a little more stable and add slightly more height to the overall bench, I'm gonna add this base. So I've got an extra piece of 2x6 laying around. I'm gonna cut this to length, about 1 additional inch on either side compared to the support post, to give it a little bit of extension past the sides. So just like I did for the top, I'm going to use my router just to knock off the sharp edges. I'm now going to secure the seat post to the little base pads that I made. Okay, that looks pretty good. So I'm just going to use these 2.5-inch screws for the base. I could use pocket screws, but just to make sure I get a good finish, but I'm actually going to paint the surface, so I'm not too concerned about using some wood filler in the side of this thing once the screws are embedded. So I got a couple screws in the sides to tack everything in place, make sure it's centered. Now I'm going to use some extra long 3-inch screws to really drive this thing in from the center. So now that this is all secure, once everything's done, I'll just use a little bit of wood filler to fill up these holes, sand it, paint it, and should be good to go. These are my legs, and I'm thinking I'm gonna have these things set about 1 foot from each edge. I just wanna make sure this is as stable as possible. So similar to how I did the feet, I'm gonna drive screws in at an angle in the side of this vertical post along here to embed the post into the bench support. Perfect. Now all I've got to do is finish the top. I'm going to finish the top with a white stain and a clear coat, and then I'm probably just going to paint the legs a dark gray color, and this thing should be great. Now that I've got everything secured and fastened together, I'm going to go around with some wood filler and fill in the screw and nail holes and any little imperfections in the wood. I'll let that dry, and then I'll sand it and paint it. I've given the wood filler a couple hours to dry. Now I'm going to take the sanding tool and give the whole thing a good once over. I'm ready to paint my bench, and I'm going to use a couple different materials to do this. The first material I'm going to be using is a latex paint. This is some extra dark gray paint I had from another project just laying around. So I'm going to reuse this on the base, the legs of the bench, to give it a nice dark finish. And I'm going to contrast that dark finish with a white pickling stain. So this is a wipe on, wipe off stain. You're probably going to have to do 2, 3, maybe even 4 or 5 coats of this to get a really nice white finish. And the idea is that the dark legs are going to be contrasted by the white finish. And then I'm going to cover both the legs and the surface in a polyacrylic sealer. So this is a water-based sealer rather than oil-based. With the white stain, the water-based polyacrylic sealer actually dries pretty clear and doesn't yellow the white. So it's very difficult to get a sealer that doesn't yellow a white finish. So I've tried a couple different ones, and this one seems to work the best for me. One other thing I'm going to use are these dollies. So I always have a few of these laying around to move stuff around. Whenever you're painting something like this, you want to get it up off the ground. This is perfect for that. I'm going to rest the bench right on top of these, and I can spin it around, and it'll keep it a good 6 inches off the ground, just so I can get the base without missing any spots. Before I get started with any painting, I'm going to wipe the whole thing down with a damp microfiber cloth just to get rid of any dust. I'm going to start by painting the legs. So just to make sure I don't get any of my dark paint on the top surface I'm going to stain, I'm going to use a thin strip of painter's tape just to delineate the two colors I'm painting. So I'm actually going to brush this stain on with a brush and wipe it off with a microfiber cloth. So the idea is that you brush it on nice and thick, let it sit for 5 or 10 minutes or so, and then wipe off the excess. You don't want to let it fully dry because it'll dry with an inconsistent finish if you let it dry in little puddles all over the place. So make sure you wipe it off in about 5 minutes or so, just to give it a nice smooth, even finish. Let it fully cure, and then apply another coat. Do that as many times as you want until you get the finish that you desire. I'm just going to focus on getting the top fully covered, and then I'll come back and do the sides. So I've got everything covered with the pickling stain. I've let it sit for about between 5 and 10 minutes. I'm going to wipe it off with this microfiber cloth. So just really, you can't mess this up. Just the one thing you got to remember to do is just wipe it with the grain in the wood. You don't want to do like big circles or anything like that. Just wipe it in one continuous motion with the grain of the wood from right to left or left to right. Just keep consistent going with the grain of the wood. So this is pretty good. I've gotten most of the stain off. I'm just going to let this fully dry, and then I'll go ahead and apply another coat. So I previously gave these a coat of paint with some dark gray brown paint. Turns out to not be the color at all that I was looking for. So I have this other paint that I used on another project. I'm gonna give this one a shot. So I've got the legs all painted up. Now I just have to do the clear coat on the top, and this thing is ready to go. So I've let my bench dry overnight. The stain looks great, the paint looks great, and this thing is ready for sealer. So I'm gonna apply a polyacrylic sealer to only the top because I'm happy with the finish on the legs. So I'm just gonna do the sealer on the top to give it a nice durable waterproof finish that's gonna protect this bench for years to come. So you don't wanna do this too thick, just a nice even layer across the entire surface and let it just air dry. You don't wipe it off. And then I'm probably gonna do, you can do as many coats as you want on this. I'm probably gonna do 2 or 3. All right, guys, my bench is finished and it turned out great. I hope this video showed you that you don't need a massive woodworking shop to build custom furniture. Hopefully you guys learned a thing or two and you guys like my bench as much as I do. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share. If you guys have any questions or comments on the construction, leave them in the comments below. See you next time.